Hi crew, thank you for joining us here at Shape the System. Shape the System is a podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of people who help change the system for the better. We hope to inspire more people to rethink the way the world works. Well, good day everyone. I'm joined today by Carolyn Gargano. I think I've got that right. And super excited to talk to you actually, because we're going to be talking about change in the context of advertising. I think is probably the easiest way to say it. Carolyn, just love for you to just intro yourself to everyone and sort of place us in the zone here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Carolyn Gargano. I'm a group creative director here in San Francisco out in California, and I'm just delighted to be here.
Great. So in terms of advertising, I think most of us would, if we were especially putting our cynical hats on, would tend to think of advertising as kind of an industry built around getting us to consume more, buy more, perhaps be more self-conscious and, more aware of our flaws. And I want to sort of understand, how you've taken that kind of core belief and really sort of turned that on its head and taken a whole set of skills that are apparent and necessary in advertising and use those to change behavior in a different way.
Absolutely. I think for a portion of our audience that's watched Mad Men and what we think traditionally of advertising, it very much has a history that's kind of grounded in how we can kind of take psychology and perception and use that to, in a sense, kind of manipulate how we feel or connect with a brand or a product to kind of get that loyalty to make us have that purchase, right?
Right.
And it's been a very powerful, use of media. And we've seen it even, we won't dive into it at the moment, but we now see how that's happening in political elections and everything else. And with the rise of social media, I think there's been a lot more introspection of the power that we use creative for. Mm. And I think that it's kind of stopped, this industry in having a really kind of a holding up the mirror to ourselves as to
right.
how do we use this power? How can we really have an impact on our world and what are we doing? And I think
right. It did sound, I'm going to read between the lines here a bit, but there's parts of the industry or people in the industry who've, and I'm being cynical and saying develop some form of conscience or how is this sort of playing out in reality with the agencies or the creative people in the agencies?
Well, what's really exciting to me is, I really kind of started seeing a shift about 5 years ago
Sure.
where you started seeing it bubbling up, where different projects started coming in. Creatives would come into a room with an article that they've read. Wonderful creative leadership started rising up that kind of welcomed these opportunities. And with a few of these small projects that we all got involved with, we started seeing this new generation coming up through college that was more and more engaged and passionate about really giving back and doing something for the world. And it really kind of, I feel like, has fostered this to really change advertising in the industry to take a wonderful turn. So it's,
And so that puts bring that into a real context. So I'd love to, like in a typical advertising context, you're trying to understand a set of customer behaviors and probably emotions as well. And you're using that to create a sense of desire for a particular brand or a product or a service. And the way that success is measured is typically in the purchaser engagement for that product or service. So let's take those set of kind of principles and then apply that into, a real example of the way all of those things can be applied to something that instead of results in an engagement or a product or service, results in either a change in behavior or some kind of, I would say, sort of broader or social benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely the same model that we've traditionally used is the same model that we apply for doing social good projects. And that's why I think it's been so effective and why it's taken off so quickly. But a great deal of time in analytics and data and looking at what was traditionally called our target has really kind of created these profiles or these different narratives of who we're speaking to really kind of make a connection and identify what really is that call to action, what is that behavioral change that we're looking for. Right. So it's been in a traditional media where I'm trying to get someone to buy a cookie. It has a very similar structure, but it doesn't, the difference, and it's interesting, it's the nuance in it is authenticity and doing something that really kind of cuts through to have a true emotional truth that resonates with someone. So a lot of times where in the traditional model, we might be kind of artificially making that and more of a almost a manipulative, I hate to use the word manipulative, but almost kind of getting people to kind of buy into it and kind of connect with it. What's wonderful, I think, in this new model is just the human connection and truth kind of rises up. I think you have a society now that looks to see action and looks to see change. And it's more than just, I think, an awareness or an education, but they're really looking to have, I think, a greater connection with the brand that has been really powerful. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. And then so just, I'd love to sort of have an example of a campaign specifically, like a particular brand that had a set of core values and beliefs. And maybe it took for them to actually, rethink their values to bring those to light, but then decided, okay, on the basis of that, we're going to invest in a campaign that does more than just position our brand in a particular way, but also aligns us to an outcome that we want to be part of for some form of environmental or social or whatever benefit.
IKEA is a fantastic example this year of a company that's stepping into the good space, if you call it. They have a great reputation for creating a brand that represents products that are accessible to all, right? It's that wonderful furniture where everyone can afford it. You can come in. They've done a great job. It doesn't matter what your status in life is, if you're a student or a new family or just starting out, everyone can come in and have access to furniture.
Right.
What they realized, and this came from an ad agency, is a group of creatives came forward and said, it's access, but it's not access to all. What about those with disabilities?
Right.
So IKEA has started, and I think they've got about 6 or 7 products just at launch this year of coming up with the ability to do 3D printing of really simple, pieces that can, if you have a disability and you can't turn on a light, or if it's difficult getting up from a chair, some of these things we all take for granted as far as access, the people living with disability, they don't. And so these are also nice because if you're at the store, you can print it, but they've also made these open access, so anyone can download these prints and these plans for free as well. So just that's an example that I really liked a lot. Ford Motor Company, they did a wonderful project this year where you see the floor mat in a car that you would just normally think is a floor mat. We've made that into a ramp, a very simple ramp. So if you're someone who needs a wheelchair and you pull up somewhere and it doesn't have wheelchair access, you can use that to go up a simple step. And it also has a GPS locator where you can send that in for a recommendation for that community to put a ramp in that location. So those are
really,
it's really cool, right? There's just just everywhere that you look, it's so nice to see companies stepping in and creating products and doing something. And I think it's really kind of, I think, expanding their business in I think a very powerful way.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in here that I want to unpack. There's this idea of the creative idea, and you talked about with IKEA, a bunch of creatives got in a room from an ad agency. I'm sort of making air quotes when I say that, and considered what it truly meant for something to be accessible, and challenged, if you like, IKEA to say, look, you're not. If you're going to be truly accessible, you need to consider people who have accessibility needs. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word there, and I think that's an interesting idea because we tend to think about advertising agencies, and perhaps they need to change the word, as people who create ads. And really, I think if you're looking at that particular example, and probably the Ford example as well, what an ad agency is doing is a creative force that's challenging a brand to think about the products and services that they provide. And that's really fascinating to me. Is that part of an evolution of what agencies are doing generally?
Absolutely. And it's been a lot of debate. And really where this kind of has come really to, I think, a place of discussion is where you see it in some of the award shows in the industry, that's the opportunity where creatives from around the world get in a room and you get to see thinking. And initially there was a lot of discussion of, this isn't advertising, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And it's really taken off, I would say, the last 2 to 3 years. There was a wonderful creative that did a project for Gillette, and it was a simple razor. And it took him a few years to develop it. And he had gone to the agency and he had presented it, and he went to the client, and his father suffered from early onset dementia. Mm-hmm. And the ability to just shave himself became something that I think we all take for granted. Right. But when the time came for the son now to give his father a clean shave in the morning, he noticed that the razor couldn't be used. Like, it was really hard to shave his father's beard or to give him a clean shave. So he designed this wonderful razor, and it had the most beautiful, commercial that went with it, had all the advertising, but it also just did a wonderful job of a creative finding a problem like we do every day. We come in and we solve problems for clients, and just doing it in a way that created a product. And it is just incredible. I think it's definitely a different industry.
Sure. And we, 3 examples that you provided, there's been a brand on the other side, and we talked a little earlier about authenticity as well, just before we started the recording. And I'm curious though, is there this sort of goes hand in glove, right? You've got to have the brands who both have a willingness to want to explore this territory and in some respects have a authenticity or have a core value in their brand or as companies or the people at that companies that make this real rather than something that's been fabricated. How are you seeing that evolve as well with the companies themselves?
That's a great question. I think that's something that's in progress.
Right.
I really do, because it's so at this stage, I think there's so many of us in the creative community that are bringing innovations and bringing ideas to clients and really trying to tie them with their core brand values. It's just how can you get them to that next level? And that's something that I think is, I think stay tuned. I'd love to follow up this conversation, 2 years from now.
And see where that goes. I mean, I think what we're seeing, and it's kind of a juxtaposition because in some respects, people, and I'm avoiding saying the customer, but people in general are more informed than ever, and they're savvy to stuff that is manufactured, and so they can, in a lot of respects, can sniff out something that's inauthentic and has been fabricated for the purposes of eliciting an emotion. On the same breath, there's a lot of false information floating around, which also means that people tend to align to things that they already believe. And I think there's a bit of both at play here. But certainly the idea that a company like IKEA, take that example, says, look, we actually care about accessibility, and we're, I think the term in advertising is a democratizer brand. We want everyone to have access to the thing. And so this feels like a natural extension to that. And I think, you're going to see some companies who just aren't there yet. And, perhaps their starting ground is not to come to an agency and say, we want an ad that makes people feel warm and fuzzy. It's to say, well, what do you truly care about? Let's start there first. And if those values aren't there, we need to work on that first.
Absolutely. It's something too, that I'm seeing with the teams that I work with, that on every assignment, we're looking at what the ask is from the client. And we're also kind of going back with, you didn't ask for this, but here's a thought.
Right.
We know a truth that this certain group of people that we're speaking to is in denial, perhaps, about a health condition, and they can't emotionally connect with it. And I know that you want a commercial, and I know that you want them to go talk to their doctor. But honestly, what we know is they're turning the channel the second it comes up, because the fear of having this experience, the fear of being diagnosed with this, we're not connecting. Right? And there's only so many social posts you can do. But what if we came at it this way? What if we designed this innovation? What if we created something that was more of an experience and really kind of connected with them? And that's where we're starting to kind of see interest from clients, especially in the health space.
Yeah, and look, and I think on this health one, I think and from memory, the IKEA one actually had a co-creation element to it. A lot of the ads that they shot, or not even the ads, just the collateral generally, showed that they were actually working with the people who were ultimately going to use the product to design the product. And I think we're in a world now where co-creation is a whole part of the process as well. It's not here's what you need, it's what would you like. Is that part of it?
Absolutely. And I think more and more as agencies see themselves as creators and co-collaborators, I think that's really the key for this really to get to the next level.
Right.
So that's, I think people get a little caught up in their job title or a little bit up in their role, or is this billable? There's a lot of unknowns. And that's why I feel like there's a lot of brave brands out there and incredible agencies that I just applaud, that are really kind of, at this, I see it as this wonderful transformation and to redefining what advertising is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things that I'm curious about, a friend of mine who I lived with was an amazing food photographer. He had the projects that he did that he got paid for, and they were great. He had the projects he didn't really want to do, that he said, well, look, it's not really in my wheelhouse, but if you want to pay me this much, then I'm happy to do them.
Yeah.
And then he had the projects he really wanted to do. And he's like, how do we make this work? And how do we make this commercially work? And I would imagine that whilst there are some big brands, and you mentioned a couple here, who have political will or, internally and the budgets and to really hit something dramatic, there's got to be a bunch of other opportunities with much smaller players who have massive visions and massive
heart.
Yeah. And how do you engage with them?
Well, that goes right to my soul. Those are what we call the passion projects. And right. Those are, these are the ones that really created the foundation for the bigger companies. They're the case studies. They're right. The proof of concept, right? These are the brave ones, the ones that are a lot of times are more open because they don't have the dollars for the larger media spends, and they don't have the audience, right? They also tend to be, I find, just a bit more open because their purpose and their passion is just so, it just resonates with such a core truth right. that when you come in, you're completely immersed, you completely understand their vision, and you can't leave the room not wanting to help.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it really, I think, speaks to creatives. It's a natural connection.
I love it.
It's like finding a lost puppy. You've got to pick it up and take care of it. You just got to do something. There's just, it really is. Kathy Delaney over at Saatchi and Saatchi Wellness, she penned this phrase: when we feel something, we do something. Right. And I feel like that speaks to so many of us.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's, it's the idea wrapped inside the idea a lot of the time, right? Which is if I can unlock this thing and take a company that says, look, we only have let's call it a $25,000 budget in terms of media spend, and I'm going to be able to blow this idea up enough that, a million people know about it. I mean, that's one of the ultimate creative challenges anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes, for some of these things, you don't need a million people. It's the idea of the N of one, right? It's the connecting with that one person or those five people. Like, what is our mission? What are we really trying to do? And some of them really are the smallest projects that really just have more of that experience that have been, I feel like, some of the most meaningful.
Right. And typically when this is happening, so are you finding that what's happening is that a creative or an agency is going to a brand and saying, you need to understand how to connect with a broader audience around something beyond just your product or service? It needs to tie into to a mission, or are they coming to you saying, we don't, our people or ourselves, we just don't believe that we're having an impact here, and we're trying to work out how to both make good business and have an impact?
I would say 2 years ago it would be 100% an ad agency. Pretty 100% is a lot, maybe 90% of the time. It was us going to them because it was such a specific role. They were bringing us in for a partnership. Right. Now I'm feeling that it's when you bring up the subject, they're open. They've heard about it. They've seen a case study. They're aware of another brand. They're curious about what the competition has done, and that's really kind of opened the door to these larger conversations. And the more that I think different industry publications speak to this and the success of this, and I think I'm finding clients that are also looking for more and more of a sense of purpose. So above and beyond even the product, they're looking for their company to have these values that I think might even be helping them in the recruitment of employees. Like you just want to kind of we all want to stand for something. And right now, I don't think there's ever been a more important time on the planet for creativity. Right. I mean, it's the power of what we need to do and what's in front of us. So I think it's at every level. And I find as you kind of look at advertising as a different way, it's not like, I talked about Mad Men when we first got on. The partnership is different. The relationship is different. It's changing. And I feel like this idea of collaboration and connection where you kind of put your ego down or your job title down, and we just have a conversation about a core truth or an insight, an article that we've read within the industry that a client or a brand lives in, and just having that moment to have I don't know, to be able to be in a safe place to go, what if, why not, how about, there's a problem here that we came together that we could solve this or at least raise this up to a larger consciousness. Why not?
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more something that I think clients welcome. They still don't kind of know where to find the dollars for, or is it politically, that's where you kind of get into some zone there of not knowing the larger parties, if it's a political sensitive issue, or those things then become a larger conversation. But
yeah. And look, that's interesting you touch on that, because I think in any kind of society, whether it's a particular country or a particular vertical or a particular group of people, there's always the hot topics. And so often a company will say, well, it's not ours to wade into those issues. And I think a lot of people are sort of split on that, which is like, well, why wouldn't the people who I want to engage with as a brand and a product and service have an opinion on those issues? And I understand that universally, not everyone who works there will necessarily believe that, but how's the agency tackling that, or embracing that, or saying, let's not go into these issues because they're just too controversial, or not?
It's a great question. I mean, it's client by client. I feel like Nike this year did, or was it last year, with the Brave campaign that took a strong political stance. That was here's a brand that has a large demographic. You politically have people that in a divided country right now in the United States, and they really were brave and kind of made this point. They set the stage, I think, for other brands maybe to feel more of an opportunity to take a risk, to stand for something.
Right.
I feel like it really is a case by case, brand by brand situation and where they are in their life cycle. But more and more, I feel that, at least I'd like to feel that. I'd like to feel that every company has a clear sense of purpose and mission, and something that they're giving back and doing. Because I guess maybe it's just in my core belief system that no company should be all about profit.
Right.
We've got to have, beyond a financial profit, we have to have a profit for the next generations coming up. I just don't see any path other way forward.
Yeah. And look, I think there's something at play here as well. And we see this in tech a lot as well, that a lot of the ideas that need to be will be successful will involve a high degree of creative problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to be successful in that space where the creativity is a big driver of the success of something rather than necessarily the ownership of all the assets, then you need to attract creative people. And if creative people are both purpose-led and are interested in trying to be part of something larger as an outcome of that, then you have to, as a company, say, well, if we're going to be successful, this is actually the new world that we need to play in. Yeah. So I think, to your point, is as much as possible, people and brands realizing that they need to do this not only for their customers, but also for their own survival in some respects. We may not be at that point yet.
No, it's true. When you were talking, it was making me think about when I first started off in the business, there was this great book that David Ogilvy came out with. And I think I hope I get this quote properly, but it was something to the effect of, the consumer's not a moron, she's your wife. And very, very, but interesting for that time period. The way that right, it really speaks to the 1950s. But I feel that now it's the consumer isn't a consumer. It's us.
Right.
It's us as a society. I don't even like talking about it as a consumer or a target or a customer or a patient, or really each one of us having an identity and identifying, I think, at every level, every touch point of how we're kind of connecting with our choices around the world. And it's just, at least in the United States, that's what I'm seeing here. It's much broader and just, I think, a wonderful, wonderful place to be.
And I think that's playing out in the way that the advertising challenge is looking more and more like collaboration and conversation with a group of people around a common thread, rather than here's a thing, go and get that thing because you have this emotional feeling. And I think that information symmetry and kind of this trend that we've seen forever of the power shifting to the consumer is at play in that. Just want to change gears a little bit here. I know that you've got quite a specific focus on health, like that's an area for you. I want to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I was just going to add one point is that I feel like, advertising really, as much as we like to credit ourselves in some ways for, doing more of the social good space and kind of doing more of the purpose-driven work, really ultimately what advertising is we're just a mirror.
Right.
We're a mirror that reflects culture and society. And this is what culture and society wants. So that's what I think is kind of the power really has always been with society. It's just now what we're mirroring back is that true reflection of change.
Right. There's a trend here at play anyway, and that's and we're playing into that trend.
So yeah, I'm in the health space. I absolutely, it is exactly where I want to be. I started off in consumer, with Oreo cookies and orange juice and all kinds of cool stuff, but I feel there's nothing more important than health. I feel it's the one core truth that all of us share. At some point in our lives, health touches us all.
Right.
And it seems like an area for me where it really could benefit from great creativity to really help people feel better. And that's why I'm drawn to it. It's incredible when you look at where technology and science and where health has come and where it's going in our lifetime. I just can't find a more creative space to be in.
Right. And is there a personal narrative there as well? Or did you have that realization at a point where you were like, oh, okay, this is touching me now, and so I realized that there's a whole lot of opportunity here?
Yeah, it was through a project. I was back in New York, and I was asked to come on a project for HIV, and it was a moment when people were afraid to hug someone or to touch someone with HIV because of the perception of this disease. And I just had this moment where I was in the middle of working on a Nabisco commercial, and I was having this conversation with the clients about if the spoon was going to be held in the right hand or the left hand. And the way that I had, because, I thought, well, if it was the left hand, it's okay. And they said, well, you're going to be, segregating our right-handed consumers. I thought, well, what am I doing? It's like you really have that moment of what am I doing? Is that what advertising is? And this opportunity to come out to San Francisco and work with women who were the gatekeepers of inmates that were coming out of prison with HIV, and they were getting infected and spreading it to the community, and people that were afraid of touching them. And at the time, advertising was showing people with HIV, climbing mountains. The whole thing was just like so cold and so unhuman. And it just kind of clicked for me in that moment. I literally quit my job and went to which is now my current partner, Trip Hosmer, here at W2O.
Right.
Years later, we've come back together, but that was kind of an awakening of the power of creativity and health. And I need to help someone. I need to give back. I mean, what am I doing? So it just, and there's scientific data that shows that when you do something good, it feels good to yourself, right?
Sure.
You get those endorphins. So once you kind of start working on a project like that, and when you're going on a photo shoot and you're hugging someone that has HIV and they're crying because you simply had a kind act of not being afraid of them to hug them, it's very different from going on a commercial shoot that you're selling a car or something fun, and they're just as valid. It's just, for me, the emotional connection of really making an impact in the health space was just so obvious to me. I just made the move.
I love hearing the passion in your voice on this. Just in terms of some of the campaigns you've been like involved with or have driven, or whatever the right word is, with respect to that. Like, give me the in the pocket one that we're going to love.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that was kind of changing for me was back at Saatchi Wellness with Scott Carlton and Kathy Delaney, and it was a one of these ones that really kind of helped shift the agency and the amount of social good they were doing. And that's why I'll mention this one. And I think it would be homelessness and hunger. And that's been something that stayed with me. And it was an incredible campaign where we went out, and it's such an emotional one. It was a population of people that I would walk by every day on my way to work and not even want to acknowledge their existence, because that core fear of, God forbid I ever get in that situation, or they might hurt me, or what have they done, to deserve this situation. All those horrible stereotypes that you you slowly build. And this one where you started working, with this community, with this shelter in New York City was so profound in creating that awareness and really kind of, we not only created a campaign, but we ended up working with them for 5 years. We were on the board with this group, this organization. It just, God, I wish I could put it into words better, because I would need like an hour to kind of go into the depth of it. But it really, you really saw in that very small, tangible things that everyone could do and participate in a creative campaign to help move the needle and perception of those living in homelessness, the perception of those that are living in hunger, and small things that you could do that actually could change their lives. And that campaign to me it's the creative is brilliant. We love the creative, but it was the fact that we were able to come up with a campaign that could talk to someone as young as 5 years old and talk to like the chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 company, and they all got the idea and they all got something that they could act on. So I think that would be the one, a lot of passion for on that one was Crossroads Community. It was great.
Yeah, and look, if there's something online, we'll link to it in the details of the podcast as well. That's awesome. And so, like, in terms of, and this is sort of a question I ask a lot on the show, is that people who are purpose-led and who are working within a system and changing that system or helping others to be part of that change often have, a huge number of things that they're interested in, or, too many things probably. So I'd love to understand a couple of the other things that you're seeing that may not be advertising related, but certainly are people rethinking or challenging the way a system works for some greater purpose or social good.
Yes, I have a lot, and it's interesting. Because they're everywhere you look. I mean, at times, I try not to read the news, because every time you read the news, you see an insight or you see a problem, and it kind of sparks a passion. So I'm actually trying. It's funny that you asked this question, because I'm actually trying to scale it down and have a focus for 2020. So gun violence has been an area that is such an opportunity. Mental health, that's a very strong issue for me.
Yeah.
Hunger has remained an issue for me. It's something that I'm hoping with our agency at W2O we're going to be doing more of next year. This, I think the UN came out in 2017 with their statistics that 821 million people are kind of at the bottom billion almost of living in extreme poverty. I believe it's like in 58 countries.
Right.
So I feel like the opportunity there is probably where I'm going to try to invest most of my energy. But also pollution has been an area for climate change. I think climate change is something that wonderful, that I think we're going to be seeing a lot of people hopefully taking action on that in the next few years. I think Greta has been a wonderful addition to kind of getting that awareness out.
Sure.
Let's see, anything with children's health. The Junior Giants has been a wonderful organization, nonprofit that works in bullying, health, literacy, again, education. Worked with a wonderful organization at St. George's Parish for LGBTQ teens, with a statistic that 40% of teens in the United States that come out are thrown out by their families into the street. So that was an incredibly powerful project, and one that we're seeing starting to get some momentum over the last year. There's also an initiative, AIDS 2020. It's the 23rd International AIDS Conference is coming to San Francisco. That's another area still, from where I started and first got into health, and to have it coming back up into my career is a wonderful opportunity again to do something to kind of show the resilience and still everything that needs to be done for that group of people. I think is a great opportunity. Another one of our clients, Genentech, they have this incredible test called the Oncotype DX, and it transforms treatment through decisions using genomic intelligence. So there's an insight that 7 out of 10 women that have a certain type of breast cancer, they don't benefit from chemotherapy.
Right.
So if you think about the fact that 7 out of 10 women are out there in a chair, possibly having chemotherapy that they don't need, or if they're not having chemotherapy, because they're frightened from it or they're not doing it, that if they actually knew it could save their lives, what an incredible
Yeah.
and so simple. Once the tumor is removed, you send a tissue sample to Genomic Health. They do a test and they can tell you without a doubt if you need chemotherapy or not. So that's a client that I think is a wonderful, wonderful client. They're doing great work. They've helped over 1 million women this year to get tested. That's a client that I'm hoping that we can do more to get more education and awareness out for putting chemo to the test.
I love it. With so much out there that can be done or is being done or needs to be done, like just in terms of your own kind of, balance, like what's your playbook for staying on the level yourself?
That's a hard question. Wow. The passion projects happen at night and they happen on the weekends, right? They happen on the holidays. They happen on the commute home. So, to keep it in balance, I think that's why I'm trying to get it down to 1 or 2 for next year. But it's, I don't tell my agency, but they don't have to pay me. It's like I don't know how I've gotten myself in this position to do what you love so much.
Right.
And you just don't want to waste any minute. I don't want to miss an opportunity to do something to help. So it's finding a balance. I think I haven't quite achieved yet, but
I think I can't remember who said it, but someone talked about, look, we've got to stop thinking about balance and start thinking about harmony. And if your harmony is to throw yourself into this stuff on the weekends as well, then and that's what energizes you and makes you happy. Then power to you.
Yeah, and it comes, it comes, it goes. Some projects, that they require a certain intensity, and then that goes away for a few weeks and whatnot. But yeah, I think harmony is thank you for that. I've found harmony. I'm definitely at peace.
I love it. Cool. Well, we might leave it there for today. It was really lovely talking to you, and I'm sorry we got interrupted in the middle of it, but I'm sure we can work that out in the edits. Yeah, and if anyone wants to check out Carolyn's work, we'll have all the details in the links for the cast. And if there's other questions, then her links to social as well will be there.
Just a shout out to everybody listening. Thank you so much, Vincent. I think what you guys are doing to get this message out is a much needed one and an important one in our community. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I welcome it, and I really hope that you all, find your passion projects, and I look forward to seeing what incredible creative you bring to the world.
Amazing. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us here today. As always, if you know anyone who you think we should interview, please let us know. If you have any feedbacks on how to improve Shape the System, email us at feedback@shapethesystem.org.